The dust cloud rose from the stagecoach wheels as it rattled into Tonopah, Nevada. And inside, clutching a simple wooden cross so tightly her knuckles had gone white, Delilah Thompson prayed she had not made the worst mistake of her life. The year was 1887, and the journey from Boston had been brutal. 3 weeks of cramped quarters, questionable food, and endless worry about what awaited her at the end of this madness. She was 22 years old, orphaned 6 months prior when influenza had taken both her parents within days of each other, and left with debts she could never hope to repay on a seamstress's wages. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like divine intervention. Honest rancher seeking companionship, marriage-minded, strong faith preferred. She had written to Vincent Yates with trembling hands, pouring out her heart in ways that would have mortified her mother. But desperation had a way of stripping away pride. To her amazement, he had written back within 2 weeks. His letters were brief but kind, his penmanship surprisingly elegant for a man who worked with cattle and horses. He had told her about his ranch, about the wild beauty of Nevada, about his faith that sustained him through lonely years. He had sent money for passage and promised to treat her with respect and care. Now, as the stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the general store, Delilah pressed the cross to her lips and whispered one final prayer. The cross had been her grandmother's, carved by her grandfather during their own courtship in Ireland. It was the only thing of real value she owned, though its worth was entirely sentimental. "Tonopah, miss," the driver called down. "End of the line." She stepped down on wobbly legs, her blue traveling dress covered in a fine layer of dust despite her best efforts. The town was smaller than she had imagined. Just one main street with wooden buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. Men in worn hats and dusty boots stopped to stare at her, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Miss Thompson." She turned toward the voice and found herself looking at a man who matched the single photograph Vincent had sent, though the image had not quite captured the reality. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work. His hair was dark brown, nearly black, and his eyes were an unexpected shade of green. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. But what struck her most was the gentleness in those green eyes as he removed his hat. "Mr. Yates," her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Vincent, please." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face. "I hope the journey was not too difficult." It was bearable. She clutched her small carpetbag, suddenly aware of how little she had brought with her. Everything she owned in the world fit into one bag. He noticed her tight grip on both the bag and something else. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the bag. She handed it over but kept the cross pressed against her chest with her other hand. His gaze dropped to it, and his smile widened. "Your faith has led you straight to me," he said softly. "Just as mine led me to write that advertisement. I am glad to see you are a woman of belief. It means more than you might know." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. There was a weight behind his words, a story she did not yet know. "It was my grandmother's," she said, her voice gaining strength. "She told me it would protect me and guide me to where I belonged. Then I reckon she was a wise woman." He gestured down the street. "I have a few supplies to collect, and then we will head to the ranch. It is about an hour's ride. Are you up for it, or would you prefer to rest first? The boarding house is decent enough." The thought of delaying the inevitable made her stomach clench. "I would rather see my new home if that is acceptable." "More than acceptable." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His strength was evident even in that simple gesture, but his touch was careful, respectful. As they walked toward the general store, he pointed out the various buildings. "That is the saloon, though I hope you will never have cause to enter it. The church is at the far end of town, small but sturdy. Reverend Michaels is a good man. The doctor's office is next to it, and the sheriff stays in that building there when he is in town. He covers 3 towns, so he is not always present." "How often do you come into town?" she asked. "Once a month for supplies, more often if needed." "It is not a terrible ride, but it takes time away from the work." She noticed several women watching them from the boardwalk, their expressions ranging from curious to disapproving. It made her wonder how many other mail-order brides had arrived in Tonopah, and how many of those arrangements had worked out well. Inside the general store, the proprietor, a round man with a magnificent mustache, greeted Vincent warmly. "This must be the bride." "Whole town's been talking about it, Vincent. About time you brought some female companionship to that ranch. Miss Thompson, this is Harold Quincy. He runs the best general store in 3 counties, though it is also the only one." Harold laughed and shook her hand with surprising gentleness. "Welcome to Tonopah, miss. I hope you will be very happy here. Vincent is one of the finest men I know." While Vincent collected his supplies, Harold leaned closer to her. "I mean what I said, miss. There are men in this town who put on a show for courting and then show their true colors after the vows are spoken. Vincent is not one of those. Lost his parents young, built that ranch from nothing and never cheated a soul. You could have done much worse." "Thank you," she said, touched by his earnestness. The supplies loaded into the wagon, Vincent helped her up onto the seat. The wagon was well maintained, she noticed, and the 2 horses pulling it looked healthy and strong. Details, her mother had always said, told you everything about a person's character. As they left town, the landscape opened up before them in a way that made her breath catch. She had never seen so much open space, so much sky. The mountains in the distance were purple and gold in the afternoon light, and the desert scrub had its own stark beauty. "It is overwhelming at first," Vincent said, reading her expression. "I grew up in Missouri, and when I first came west, I thought I might go mad from all the emptiness. But it grows on you. Now I cannot imagine living anywhere else." "How long have you been here?" 10 years. "I was 18 when I arrived, convinced I would make my fortune in silver mining." He laughed, but there was an edge to it. "That did not work out as planned. I spent 2 years breaking my back in the mines, watching men die for a few dollars a day. Then I met a rancher who needed help, and he taught me the trade. When he passed, he left me a small piece of land. I have been building on it ever since. I am sorry about your mentor. John was a good man. He had no family of his own, and I think he saw me as the son he never had. He is the one who encouraged me to keep faith, to attend church, to believe that God had a plan even when everything seemed dark." Vincent's hands were steady on the reins, his profile strong against the vast sky. "I promised him I would build something lasting, something good, a family, a real home." She understood then the weight he carried. "And that is why you sent for a bride, partially, but also because I was lonely." His honesty surprised her. "This land is beautiful, but it is hard and it is isolating. I wanted someone to share it with, someone who understood that faith and hard work can build something meaningful." "And if we do not suit?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. "I have thought about that. It is a risk for both of us. But I give you my word, Delilah, if you find after a time that you cannot bear it here or cannot bear me, I will not hold you to any promise. I will make sure you have the means to go wherever you wish." The use of her first name sent a flutter through her chest. "That is generous. It is only right. Marriage should not be a prison." He glanced at her, and the sincerity in his eyes made her throat tight. but I hope we will suit. Your letters suggested a woman of courage and heart. That is all I truly need." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip of hooves. The cross remained in her hand, and she found herself silently thanking her grandmother for the courage to take this leap. The ranch appeared gradually, starting with fence lines, then cattle grazing in the distance, and finally the buildings themselves. The main house was modest but well built, made of wood that had weathered to a soft gray. There was a barn, a stable, a few other outbuildings, and a windmill turning lazily in the breeze. "It is not grand," Vincent said, and she heard uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "It is wonderful," she said honestly. After the cramped boarding house she had shared with 3 other seamstresses in Boston, the idea of a whole house seemed like unimaginable luxury. He helped her down from the wagon, and she noticed his hands lingered a moment longer than necessary at her waist. When their eyes met, he stepped back quickly, color rising in his cheeks. "I should show you inside. I have tried to make it comfortable, but it is a bachelor's home. I hope you will feel free to change whatever you like." The interior was simple but clean, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living space, 2 bedrooms, and a small washroom. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and there were touches that surprised her. Books on a shelf, a rocking chair by the fireplace, wildflowers in a jar on the table. "The bedroom on the right is yours," he said quickly. "I have taken the smaller one. I want you to feel safe here, Delilah. We will marry when you are ready, not before." She turned to look at him fully. "You would wait for as long as you need. I want a true wife, not a woman who feels trapped." He set her bag down carefully. "I know this is strange for you. It is strange for me too. But I believe we can build something good if we are patient with each other." Impulsively, she reached out and took his hand. It was rough with calluses, warm and large, and it enveloped hers completely. "I think my grandmother was right," she said softly. "I think I was meant to come here." His expression shifted into something so hopeful it made her chest ache. "I will do everything in my power to make you happy." Over the following days, they fell into a careful dance of learning each other. Vincent rose before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, and she discovered he employed 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse beyond the barn. Carlos and Pete were rough-looking men, but they treated her with respect and genuine pleasure at having a woman's presence on the ranch. She took over the cooking, which Vincent seemed to appreciate more than words could express. His attempts at meals had apparently been barely edible. She also began to organize the house, adding small touches that made it feel more like a home. She found fabric in town and made curtains. She planted herbs by the kitchen door. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental oven. Vincent, in turn, began to teach her about the ranch. He showed her how to approach the horses safely, how to read the weather in the sky, how to spot trouble in the herd. He was patient and encouraging, never mocking her ignorance or Eastern ways. But more than the practical matters, they talked. In the evenings, after dinner, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, and he would tell her about his dreams for the ranch, about his childhood in Missouri, about the faith that had sustained him through dark times. She told him about Boston, about her parents, about the fear and grief that had driven her west. "I was so afraid," she admitted one evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival. "On the stagecoach, I kept thinking I might arrive to find a monster waiting for me." "And instead you found a man who burns breakfast and talks to his horses," Vincent said with a laugh. "I found a good man." She looked at the cross, which she had placed on the mantel in the main room. "My grandmother told me that faith was not just belief in God, but belief in goodness itself. Belief that the world could be kind if we opened our hearts to it. He reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Your grandmother sounds like she was remarkable. She was. I wish you could have met her." "I wish I could have too." She raised a remarkable granddaughter. The compliment made her blush, but she did not pull her hand away. His touch had become something she looked forward to, these small moments of connection that felt like promises of something deeper. It was 3 weeks after her arrival when Vincent asked her to ride out with him to see the far pasture. She had become comfortable on horseback, or at least comfortable enough not to embarrass herself, and the idea of seeing more of the ranch appealed to her. They rode for nearly an hour, leaving the ranch buildings far behind. The landscape here was different, with more trees and a small creek running through a valley. The grass was greener, and she could see why the cattle liked it. Vincent dismounted and helped her down, then led her to a spot beneath a large cottonwood tree. The creek burbled nearby, and the shade was a relief from the bright sun. "This is my favorite place on the entire ranch," he said. "When I need to think, I come here." She could understand why. There was a peace here, a sense of being far removed from the world's troubles. He was quiet for a moment, then turned to her with an expression she could not quite read. "Delilah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Her heart began to beat faster. "All right." "Are you happy here? Truly happy, not just making the best of a difficult situation?" She considered the question carefully. "I am happier than I expected to be. Happier than I was in Boston, certainly. But are you happy with me?" The vulnerability in his voice touched her deeply. "Yes," she said simply. "Vincent, I came here expecting duty and obligation. What I found was kindness and respect and something that feels like it could become much more." "Much more," he repeated softly. He reached out and cupped her face with one hand, his touch gentle. "I have come to care for you a great deal, more than I thought possible in such a short time, and I find myself hoping that perhaps you might feel the same." "I do." The words came easily, naturally. "I look forward to seeing you each day. I listen for your step on the porch. I find excuses to be near you. If that is not the beginning of love, I do not know what is." His smile was brilliant. "Then perhaps it is time we made this official. Would you consent to marry me, Delilah? Truly marry me, not as an arrangement but as a choice?" "Yes." She barely got the word out before he was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle against hers. It was her first kiss, and it felt like everything a first kiss should be. Sweet and thrilling and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will speak to Reverend Michaels tomorrow. We can marry as soon as you wish." "Next Sunday," she said. "I would like to be your wife by next Sunday." The week passed in a flurry of preparation. She had one good dress, but it was dark wool, more suitable for Boston winters than Nevada ceremonies. To her surprise and delight, the women of Tonopah rallied around her. Harold Quincy's wife, Martha, appeared at the ranch with 3 other women, their arms full of fabric and lace. "Every bride deserves a proper dress," Martha declared. "Even if time is short, we will make it happen." They worked together in the main room, cutting and stitching while Delilah stood for fittings. The women peppered her with questions about Vincent, about the ranch, about her journey west. She found herself relaxing around them, their genuine warmth dissolving her nervousness about being accepted. "Vincent is one of the good ones," Martha said as she pinned the hem. "There are men in this territory who see women as property or conveniences. Vincent is not like that. He has always been respectful, kind. You are lucky, dear." "I know," Delilah said. "I feel it every day." The dress came together beautifully. Simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, a fitted bodice and full skirt. When she tried it on the day before the wedding, she barely recognized herself in the small mirror. "You are lovely," Martha said. tears in her eyes. "Vincent will not be able to take his eyes off you." That night, Vincent stayed in the bunkhouse with Carlos and Pete, observing the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. Delilah lay in her bed, unable to sleep, the cross clutched in her hands. Tomorrow she would become Vincent Yates's wife. The thought filled her with joy and only a small flutter of nervousness. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Martha and the other women arrived early to help her dress and arrange her hair. They wove wildflowers into her dark curls and declared her perfect. The ceremony was to take place in the small church at the end of Tonopah's Main Street. As she rode into town in the wagon driven by Carlos, who had volunteered for the duty, she saw that the entire town seemed to have turned out. People lined the street, waving and calling out congratulations. Inside the church, Vincent waited at the altar with Reverend Michaels. He wore a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his boots polished. When he saw her walking down the aisle, his expression transformed into something so tender she felt tears spring to her eyes. She carried the wooden cross instead of flowers, and when she reached him, he took it from her gently and held it between their joined hands. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Michaels began, and Delilah barely heard the words that followed. She was too focused on Vincent, on the love shining in his green eyes, on the sure knowledge that she had made the right choice. When the Reverend prompted Vincent to speak his vows, he did so in a clear, strong voice. "I, Vincent Yates, take you, Delilah Thompson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be faithful in good times and bad, in sickness and health. I promise to build a life with you founded on faith, respect, and true partnership. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Her own vows were similar, but she added, "I promise to trust in the path that brought me to you, to believe in the goodness we can build together, and to never forget that faith led me straight to you when I needed you most." The Reverend smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Nevada and by God above, I pronounce you husband and wife. Vincent, you may kiss your bride." Vincent's kiss was different from the one by the creek. Deeper, more confident, full of promise. The small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the saloon, which had been cleaned and decorated for the occasion. Harold and Martha had arranged for food and drink, and there was even a fiddle player who struck up lively tunes. Delilah found herself swept into dances with various townspeople, all eager to welcome her properly, but her eyes kept finding Vincent across the room, and his gaze never strayed far from her. When the sun began to set and people began to make their goodbyes, he appeared at her side. "Ready to go home, wife?" The words sounded like music on his lips. "More than ready, husband." The ride back to the ranch was quiet but charged with anticipation. When they arrived, Vincent lifted her down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "Tradition," he said with a grin, carrying her across the threshold. Inside, he set her down gently in their bedroom, the larger one that was now truly theirs. He had brought in wildflowers and the bed had fresh linens. The wooden cross sat on the dresser, catching the lamplight. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, brushing a curl back from her face. "A little," she admitted. "But not afraid, never afraid with you." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she felt any remaining nervousness melt away. This was right. This was meant to be. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, full of whispered words and tender touches. Vincent was patient, guiding her through each new experience with care and love. When they finally lay together afterward, her head on his chest and his arms around her, she felt a completeness she had never known before. "I love you," he said into the darkness. I know it is soon, but I cannot pretend otherwise. I love you, Delilah. I love you too, she whispered back. With everything I am. The months that followed were marked by both hard work and deep happiness. Delilah threw herself into making the ranch house a true home. She continued to sew, taking in work from the women in town to earn a bit of money of her own. Vincent never questioned this, instead expressing pride in her skills and independence. She learned to milk the cow they kept for dairy, to tend the vegetable garden that expanded under her care, to preserve food for the winter. Vincent taught her to shoot, insisting that she needed to know how to protect herself when he was out on the range. "This land is safer than it used to be," he explained as he showed her how to hold the rifle properly. "But there are still dangers. Mountain lions, the occasional drifter who means harm. I need to know you can defend yourself." She proved to be a decent shot, which pleased them both. But more than the practical skills, what she treasured were the quiet moments. Reading together in the evening, talking about their dreams, making love in the big bed they now shared without hesitation. When fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the first hints of the winter to come, Delilah realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month to be sure, then told Vincent over breakfast one morning. "I believe I am with child," she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. He went completely still, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He was up and around the table in seconds, pulling her to her feet and spinning her around. "Are you certain?" he demanded, setting her down carefully as if she might break. "As certain as I can be without seeing the doctor. I have missed 2 months now and I feel different, tired but in a good way. And yesterday the smell of bacon made me ill." He laughed, a joyous sound that filled the room. Then he dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, God, for this blessing." Tears streamed down her face. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, looking up at her with wonder in his eyes. They rode to town the next day to see the doctor, who confirmed what she already knew. "You are about 2 months along," Dr. Morris said, a kindly man in his 50s. "The baby should arrive in late May or early June. You are healthy and strong, Mrs. Yates. I see no reason why this should not be a smooth pregnancy." The news spread through Tonopah like wildfire, and once again the women rallied around her. Martha arrived with yarn and knitting needles, determined to teach Delilah to make blankets and sweaters. Others brought advice, baby clothes their own children had outgrown, and an endless stream of recommendations. Vincent became even more protective if that were possible. He insisted she not overwork herself, that she rest in the afternoons, that she eat plenty of good food. It would have been smothering if it were not so clearly born of love. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one day when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "I know, but I cannot help it. You are carrying the most precious cargo in the world." He placed his hand over her stomach, which was just beginning to show a small curve. "My wife and my child." She softened immediately, covering his hand with hers. "We are both lucky to have you." As winter set in, they spent more time indoors. Vincent worked on repairing tack and tools, while Delilah sewed baby clothes and read aloud from books. They talked about names, about how they would raise their child, about the values they wanted to instill. "I want our children to know faith," Vincent said one snowy evening. "Not the rigid kind that judges and condemns, but the kind that sustains and uplifts, the kind that brought you to me." "Our children," she repeated, smiling. "You think there will be more than one, God willing." "I want this house to be full of laughter and love. I want a family that knows what it means to work hard and care for each other." "Then that is what we will build," she promised. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly with Carlos and Pete, who had become like family. Delilah had made each of them warm scarves, and Vincent had given them bonuses from the ranch's profits. In return, they had carved a beautiful cradle for the baby, working on it secretly in the barn for weeks. When they presented it, Delilah burst into tears. "It is perfect," she managed between sobs. "Thank you both so much." Vincent's gift to her was a delicate silver locket with space for 2 small photographs. "For you and the baby," he explained, "so you can keep us close to your heart always." Her gift to him was simpler: a new Bible with his name embossed on the cover, and inside the front cover she had written, "To my husband whose faith brought me home." He held it like it was made of gold, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I will treasure this always." The winter was mild by Nevada standards, but there were still difficult days. Supplies ran low, and Vincent had to make dangerous rides into town during snowstorms. The isolation was challenging, and Delilah sometimes felt the weight of being so far from neighbors. But they had each other, and that made all the difference. On the hardest days, when the wind howled and the cold seemed to seep into her bones, Vincent would hold her close and remind her that spring was coming, that their baby was coming, that everything good was worth waiting for. When spring finally arrived, it came with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. The cattle had their calves, the garden could be planted again, and Delilah's belly had grown round and prominent. She felt the baby move constantly now, little flutters and kicks that amazed her every time. Vincent spent hours with his hand on her stomach, talking to their child. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you. Your mother and I have prepared everything for your arrival. We have a cradle and clothes and more love than you can imagine." May arrived with warm sunshine and the promise of new beginnings. Delilah was enormous now, uncomfortable and waddling, but happier than she could have imagined possible. She had been in Nevada for just over a year, and it felt like she had lived a lifetime. The labor began on a bright morning in late May. She was hanging laundry when the first pain hit, strong enough to make her gasp and drop the sheet she was holding. "Vincent," she called, and he came running from the barn, fear written across his face. "Is it time?" "I think so." "The pains are strong." He got her inside and sent Carlos racing to town for the doctor and Martha, who had promised to attend the birth. Then he stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement as the pains grew stronger and closer together. "Doctor." Morris arrived first, calm and professional. "Everything looks normal," he assured them after examining her. "First babies take their time. This will be a long day, but Mrs. Yates is strong." Martha arrived soon after, taking over with the confidence of a woman who had attended dozens of births. She shooed Vincent out of the bedroom, ignoring his protests. "This is women's work," she said firmly. "You can pace and pray, but you will only be in the way." Vincent reluctantly left, but Delilah could hear him in the main room, his footsteps steady as he walked back and forth, his voice low as he prayed. The hours that followed were the hardest of her life. The pain was tremendous, beyond anything she had imagined. But every time she thought she could not endure another moment, she heard Vincent's voice through the door, and it gave her strength. "You can do this, Delilah," he called when she screamed. "You are the strongest woman I know. I love you. I believe in you." Finally, as the sun began to set, painting the room in golden light, Dr. Morris said the words she had been desperate to hear. "One more push, Mrs. Yates, just one more." She bore down with everything she had left, and suddenly the pressure released, and there was a piercing wail that was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "It is a boy," Martha announced, laughing and crying at the same time. A healthy, beautiful boy. The door burst open and Vincent rushed in, all propriety forgotten. His eyes went straight to the tiny, squalling bundle that Dr. Morris was cleaning and wrapping in a blanket. "A son," Vincent breathed. "We have a son. Would you like to hold your baby?" Martha asked Delilah, and she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. They placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and she looked down at her son's red, scrunched-up face with absolute wonder. He had dark hair like his father, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were dark blue. Vincent knelt beside the bed, one hand supporting the baby, the other cupping Delilah's face. "You did it. You brought our son into the world. I have never been more proud or more in love. He is perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What will you name him?" Dr. Morris asked. They had discussed many names, but in that moment, Delilah knew exactly what felt right. "Daniel. For my father, Daniel Vincent Yates." Vincent's smile was radiant. "Daniel, welcome to the world, son. Welcome home." The weeks that followed were exhausting and magical in equal measure. Daniel was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. But still, the constant care required was overwhelming. Vincent was a devoted father, taking on night feedings with bottles of milk Delilah had expressed, changing diapers without complaint, and walking the floor with Daniel when he was fussy. "You are a natural," Delilah said one night, watching him rock their son. "I am terrified," he admitted. "He is so small, so fragile. Every time he cries, I am afraid something is wrong." "That just means you care. You are going to be a wonderful father." Carlos and Pete were equally smitten, stopping by the house constantly to peek at the baby and offer their own rough but sincere congratulations. Even the hard-bitten ranch hands turned soft when Daniel wrapped his tiny fingers around theirs. As summer progressed, Daniel grew and thrived. He was alert and active, his dark eyes taking in everything around him. Delilah would sit in the rocking chair Vincent had made, nursing their son and feeling a contentment so deep it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked one evening as they sat on the porch, Daniel asleep in his cradle beside them. "Answering that advertisement, coming to this wild place," she looked at him in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment. This is where I belong. You and Daniel are my whole world. I think about how close I came to not placing that advertisement at all. Pete told me I was crazy, that no decent woman would want to come to a rough ranch in the middle of nowhere, but something pushed me to do it anyway." "Faith," she said simply. "Your faith that you would find what you needed, my faith that I would find where I belonged. And my grandmother's cross, which gave me courage when I was afraid." She glanced at the wooden cross, which now hung on the wall beside the front door. "It truly did lead me straight to you." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I thank God for you every day. For you and for Daniel. You have made my life complete. And you have given me a home, a purpose, and a love I never dared hope for. We are blessed, Vincent, truly blessed." The years that followed were full and rich. They added to their family. A daughter named Grace 2 years after Daniel, and then another son, Samuel, 3 years after that. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management, and they were able to build an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Delilah's sewing business expanded, and she became known throughout the territory for her skill. Women came from as far as 2 towns over to have her make their wedding dresses and special occasion garments. The money she earned went into an account for the children's futures, though Vincent insisted she spend some on herself as well. Their children grew up strong and faithful, just as they had hoped. Daniel was serious and thoughtful, with his father's work ethic and his mother's gentle nature. Grace was spirited and curious, always into everything, keeping them constantly on their toes. Samuel was the baby, sweet and affectionate, adored by his older siblings. On Sundays, they attended church as a family, sitting in the pew that had become theirs over the years. The wooden cross went with them, carried by whichever child felt they needed its protection that week. It became a family tradition, a symbol of faith passed down through generations. When Daniel was 10, he asked about the cross. "Mother, why is this cross so important to you?" They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, and Delilah pulled him close. "This cross belonged to my grandmother, who gave it to me before I came west to meet your father. I was so afraid, but the cross reminded me to have faith. And that faith led me to the greatest blessings of my life, your father and you and your brother and sister. So it is like a good luck charm, not luck, sweetheart, faith. There is a difference. Luck is random chance. Faith is trusting that even when you cannot see the path, even when you are afraid, you are being guided toward where you need to be. You think I will need it someday, to find my own path," she kissed the top of his head. "Perhaps, and if you do, it will be waiting for you. But for now, your path is right here with us, learning and growing and becoming the man you are meant to be." Vincent joined them, settling into his rocking chair with a satisfied sigh. At 42, he was still strong and vital, though the sun had added lines around his eyes and streaks of gray to his hair. Delilah thought he had never been more handsome. "What are we talking about?" he asked. "The cross, and faith, and how we found each other," Delilah said. He smiled and reached for her hand. After 15 years of marriage, the gesture was as natural as breathing. "Best day of my life when you stepped off that stagecoach. Well, tied with the days our children were born. Tied," Grace demanded, appearing from the house with Samuel toddling behind her. "We should be first." Vincent laughed and pulled her onto his lap despite her protests that she was too old for such things at 8 years old. "You are all first, every one of you. How is that?" "That does not make sense, Papa," Grace said, but she snuggled against him anyway. Samuel climbed onto Delilah's lap, and for a moment they were all together as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. These were the moments Delilah treasured most, the simple, ordinary moments that were actually anything but ordinary. They were the fulfillment of everything she had hoped for when she clutched that cross and boarded the stagecoach east. As the children grew older, the ranch continued to thrive. Vincent brought on more help, expanding the herd and the land. He was respected throughout the territory as a fair employer and an honest businessman. Men sought his advice, and he gave it freely, always willing to help a neighbor in need. Delilah became a pillar of the community as well. She started a women's group at the church, organizing charitable efforts for families facing hardship. She taught sewing classes to young girls, passing on her skills. She opened her home to anyone who needed a meal or a listening ear. Their marriage remained strong, weathering the inevitable challenges that came with ranching life. Drought years, cattle disease, the occasional injury or illness. Through it all, they clung to each other and to their faith, remembering that they had been brought together for a purpose. When Daniel was 16, tall and strong like his father, he came to them with a question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Father, Mother, I have been thinking about my future. I want to stay on the ranch to learn everything you can teach me, Father. I want to build on what you have created here." Vincent's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "Son, there is nothing that would make me prouder. This land, this ranch, it is all for you and your brother and sister. I have always hoped at least one of you would want to continue it." "All of us will contribute," Daniel said seriously. "Grace wants to start breeding horses, and Samuel talks about expanding into crops as well as cattle. We have been planning it, how we can work together to make this place even better." Delilah listened to her children discuss their dreams and felt her heart swell with pride. They had done it, she and Vincent. They had built not just a ranch but a legacy, a family bound by love and faith and shared purpose. That night, lying in bed beside her husband, she said, "They are going to be all right, our children. They are going to be more than all right." "They take after their mother," Vincent said, pulling her close, "strong and faithful and full of grace." "And their father," she countered, "hard-working and kind and true." He kissed her, and after 20 years together, the spark was still there, the love as fresh as it had been when she first stepped off that stagecoach. Grace, as promised, did start breeding horses, and she had a gift for it. By the time she was 20, she had established a reputation for training the finest horses in 3 counties. Young men came from far and wide, ostensibly to buy horses, but really to court the beautiful, spirited daughter of Vincent and Delilah Yates. She chose carefully, eventually settling on a quiet schoolteacher named James who shared her love of animals and faith. Their wedding was a grand affair, with half the territory in attendance. Delilah sewed her daughter's dress, her fingers not as nimble as they once were, but her skill still evident. As she watched Grace walk down the aisle on Vincent's arm, both of them with tears in their eyes, Delilah thought of her own wedding day in that same small church. She thought of the cross she had carried instead of flowers, and of Vincent's words, "Your faith has led you straight to me." Samuel stayed on the ranch as well, proving to have a head for business that complemented Daniel's ranching skills perfectly. Together, the brothers expanded the operation until the Yates Ranch was one of the most successful in Nevada. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Carlos passed away when he was in his 70s, still working until the very end. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Vincent carved his headstone himself. Pete followed 5 years later, and he was laid to rest beside his friend. "We are getting old," Vincent said at Pete's funeral, leaning heavily on his cane. He was 68 now, still strong but feeling the weight of years of hard labor. "We are blessed," Delilah corrected, taking his arm. She was 63, her dark hair now shot through with silver, but her eyes still bright. "We have had a good life, my love, a very good life." They became grandparents, and then great-grandparents. The house that had once seemed so empty was now always full of children's laughter during family gatherings. Daniel and his wife had 4 children. Grace and James had 3. Samuel and his wife had 5, including 2 sets of twins that kept everyone on their toes. On their 30th anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. The whole family gathered, along with friends from Tonopah and beyond. There was food and music and dancing, and Delilah found herself swept back in time to their wedding reception in that cleaned-up saloon. Vincent must have been thinking the same thing because he pulled her into a slow dance, ignoring the lively fiddle music. "Do you remember our wedding day?" he asked, "every moment of it. You in your new suit, looking so handsome I could barely breathe, the way you looked at me when I came down the aisle. You took my breath away, you still do." He kissed her forehead. 30 years. "It seems like no time at all, and yet I cannot imagine life without you. You are woven into every part of me, as you are in me. You gave me everything, Vincent. A home, a family, a purpose. But most of all, you gave me love. Real, enduring love. That cross your grandmother gave you, it is still hanging by the door, still guiding people home." She smiled. "As it always will. That is its purpose, to remind us that faith leads us where we need to be." As the sun set on their celebration, their children and grandchildren gathered around them. Daniel, now running the ranch with his father in an advisory role, raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. They came together strangers, brought by faith and necessity. They built a life, a family, and a legacy through hard work, love, and unwavering faith in each other and in God. They have shown us what a true partnership looks like, what real love means. Everything we are, everything we have flows from them. To Vincent and Delilah Yates, to Vincent and Delilah, the crowd echoed, and Delilah felt tears stream down her face. Vincent held her close, his own eyes wet. "We did all right, did we not? We did better than all right," she whispered. "We did wonderfully." The years continued, gentler now as they entered their twilight. Vincent's health began to fail, his heart growing weak. Dr. Morris's son, who had taken over his father's practice, urged him to rest, to take it easy. "I have been taking it easy for 5 years," Vincent grumbled. "I am not an invalid." But Delilah saw the fear in his eyes, the understanding that their time was growing short. She held him tighter at night, memorizing the feel of him beside her, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body. On a cool evening in October, when Vincent was 73 and Delilah was 68, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The cross hung beside the door, weathered but strong, still standing as a testament to faith. "Read to me," Vincent asked, his voice weaker than it once was. She picked up their Bible, the one she had given him so many years ago, worn now from constant use. She read from Corinthians. "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs." "That is us," Vincent said softly. "That has always been us. Love never fails," she continued, her voice breaking. "And ours never has, Vincent. Through everything, our love has been constant." He took her hand, his grip still firm despite his failing body. "I need you to promise me something, anything. When I am gone, do not grieve too long. You have so much life left to live, so many grandchildren to spoil, so much love to give. Promise me you will keep going, keep living fully." "Vincent, promise me, Delilah. I cannot bear the thought of you fading away without me. You are too vital, too important to too many people." She wiped away tears. "I promise, but you are not going anywhere for a long time yet." He smiled, but they both knew the truth. 3 weeks later, Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep, Delilah beside him, their hands clasped together. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, finally free from pain. The funeral was the largest Tonopah had ever seen. People came from across Nevada and beyond to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved by all who knew him. Daniel delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he spoke of his father's integrity, his kindness, his unwavering faith. "He built more than a ranch," Daniel said. "He built a family. He built a community. He built a legacy of love that will endure for generations, and he loved our mother with a devotion that showed us all what marriage should be." They buried Vincent on the same hill where Carlos and Pete rested, with a view of the ranch he had built from nothing. Delilah stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and placed the wooden cross on top of the casket before they lowered it into the ground. "Your faith led me straight to you," she whispered, "and my love will follow you into eternity." The months that followed were the hardest of Delilah's life. The bed felt too big, the house too quiet. She would catch herself turning to tell Vincent something, only to remember he was gone. But she had promised him she would keep living, and she was determined to honor that promise. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, making sure she was never alone for long. She threw herself into her sewing, into the church, into being the best grandmother she could be. And slowly, the sharp edge of grief dulled into something more bearable. A sweet sadness, a longing tempered by gratitude for the years they had shared. On what would have been their 40th anniversary, she made a pilgrimage to Vincent's grave. She brought wildflowers, the kind he had always loved, and sat beside the headstone Daniel had carved. Vincent Yates, beloved husband, father, and friend. His faith was his foundation. 40 years, she said to the wind. 40 years since I stepped off that stagecoach, terrified and clutching my grandmother's cross. You were so kind to me from the very first moment. You made me feel safe and valued and loved. You gave me the life I always wanted but never dared to dream I could have. She touched the stone gently. Our children are thriving. The ranch is stronger than ever. We have 15 grandchildren now and 3 great-grandchildren with more on the way. They all carry pieces of you, Vincent. Daniel has your integrity, Grace has your spirit, Samuel has your business sense. And all of them have your capacity for love. The wind rustled through the grass, and she fancied she could feel his presence, his approval. I miss you every day, but I am keeping my promise. I am living fully, loving completely, giving generously, just as you taught me. She pulled the cross from her pocket. She had retrieved it from Vincent's casket after the burial, unable to let it go into the ground. This cross brought me to you. It gave me courage when I was afraid. And now it reminds me that I will see you again, that our love transcends death itself. Wait for me, my darling. Wait for me, and we will be together again. Delilah lived for another 12 years, dying peacefully at the age of 80, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In her final moments, she smiled and reached out her hand. "Vincent," she whispered, "I am coming home." They buried her beside him on the hill, and Daniel placed the wooden cross between their graves, sunk deep into the earth so it would stand forever as a symbol of the faith that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through life and beyond. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's leadership, and then his sons and his sons after that. The Yates family became a Nevada institution, known for their integrity, their generosity, and their faith. The cross remained on the hill, weathered by sun and wind and rain but never breaking. And every member of the family, before they married or made a major decision or faced a great challenge, would visit that cross and remember the story of how Delilah Thompson came west with nothing but faith and courage, and how Vincent Yates had looked at that cross and said, "Your faith has led you straight to me." It became a family legend, told and retold through the generations. The story of the mail-order bride who brought a wooden cross, and the cowboy who recognized that her faith was the foundation on which they would build a love story for the ages. A love that had created a family, built a legacy, and proved that sometimes, when you have faith in something larger than yourself, you find exactly what you did not even know you were looking for. And on that hill in Nevada, beneath the endless sky, 2 graves and a wooden cross stood as eternal testament to a truth both simple and profound. That faith leads us home, that love endures beyond death, and that the greatest adventures begin when we trust enough to take a leap into the unknown. The cross stands there still, or so the story goes, guiding new generations of the Yates family toward their own destinies, their own loves, their own adventures. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right across that Nevada hillside, you can almost hear the echo of 2 voices joined together in eternal love, whispering the same promise across the years. "Your faith has led you straight to me, and my love will follow you into eternity." This was the story of Delilah and Vincent, the mail-order bride and the cowboy, whose faith brought them together and whose love created something that would last forever. It was a story of hope in the face of uncertainty, of courage in the face of fear, of love in its truest, most enduring form. And it was proof that sometimes the best things in life come when we trust in something greater than ourselves and take that terrifying, exhilarating leap into the future. Their descendants still gather at the ranch every year, bringing their children to see the cross and hear the story. They tell them about great-great-great-grandmother Delilah, who came west with nothing, and great-great-great-grandfather Vincent, who saw past the dust and fear to the woman of courage beneath. They tell them about the wooden cross that symbolized faith when faith was all there was. And they remind them that love, real love, is built on that same foundation. Faith in each other, faith in the future, and faith that even when the path is unclear, you are heading exactly where you need to be. The Yates Ranch prospered into the 20th century and beyond, adapting with the times but never losing sight of the values Vincent and Delilah had established. They treated their workers fairly, cared for their land responsibly, and remained active in their community. The little church in Tonopah where Vincent and Delilah had married still stood, carefully maintained by the family in honor of their ancestors. And every Sunday, a member of the Yates family could be found in that same pew, sometimes with a child on their lap, always with gratitude in their hearts for the courage of two people who had trusted in faith and found love beyond measure. The wooden cross had returned to its place by the door of the ranch house, where it had hung for so many years, a reminder to all who entered that this was a home built on faith, sustained by love, and blessed beyond measure.